All right. Well, thank you everybody for taking some time out of your busy day to join us. And big shout out and thank you to Brenda McClellan and TC Connect for hosting us. It's a great opportunity for us. Anytime we can get in front of potential employers, we grab it and we run with it. Thank you. And also, I just wanted to mention Jennifer Stoll, who has been, I think, our greatest champion up there in Traverse City for getting people with disabilities into jobs. And again, our team, thank you to the team and Mike and Logan for being able to help with our presentation today and be part of the panel. So what we will do today, of course, the title here, An Economy Not Made for Us, I think that's going to make much more sense as we get through the next hour. We're mainly my role here is to just give you a little bit of background as to who we are as an organization and how we landed in the employment space and really committed to people with disabilities getting jobs. So we'll talk a little bit about that, move right into the business case for disability inclusive hiring, and then our role in TC, and then we'll go right into the pilot and panel discussion and follow up with resources. We really were committed to spending the majority of the hour in the panel, recognizing that hearing from peers about how this works, how it gets implemented, because we frequently get leadership and executive champions within both large and small businesses that are committed and want to move forward with disability hiring, but much of the breakdown actually happens after that. It's how you actually implement. And hopefully today you'll have a better understanding of at least how our process works. Just to know that we are one organization of a few that are in this space, and Grand Traverse Industries is a great partner up there and part of our steering committee. So I think they're included today, or at least joined as an attendee, and just wanted to make sure that I recognize that we have partners doing this great work as well. Okay. So just really wanted to kind of get us started here. I don't have to go through the entire quote, but mainly we really believe that we're on the cusp of a social movement here, and employers are recognizing the financial and human capital that's lost when we are not engaged in inclusive hiring. We're breaking the silence. And that disability doesn't have to define talent. It's really looking beyond disability at skills and ability. So we recently made a public statement and commitment to place 101,000 people in jobs over the next 10 years. As a state, it's a great big goal. We certainly don't believe as an individual organization that we would be able to accomplish that alone. It really is about collaborations and working with the business community to make that happen. So we're going to just jump right into some background information on disability in particular. And Mikhail, I believe at this point you are up.
Excellent. So there's really two pieces of information that I want people to take from the slide. The first is that 1 in 4 Americans has a disability. It's the largest minority group in the United States. And the second part is challenging because disability can be medically. It leads to profound challenges in other areas of individuals' lives. So people with disabilities are substantially more likely to be in poverty, substantially more likely to work part-time, and significantly less likely to work in management or professional occupations. And Colleen, if you can go next slide. And so the question is, why is that the economic reality for so many? And there's a few reasons. Traditional employer screening processes will sometimes screen out people with disabilities. It's often a very vicious cycle where marginalization begets marginalization. I work right now with an engineer from the University of Michigan who unfortunately wasn't able through his disability, due to his disability, to secure an internship, which made it more difficult for him to secure a position out of school. And then that unemployment gap has made it even harder for him to re-enter the workforce. So it creates this kind of, as I said, progressively declining vicious cycle that that can really be a challenge for our individuals. Interview protocols and norms, rules about eye contact, animation, enthusiasm, et cetera. This we know to find is a pretty significant barrier for people with autism, but with other disabilities as well. Stereotypes and biases. There's often misconceptions that people with disabilities are less intelligent, less hardworking, less reliable. I currently work with, and we just actually recommended to a position yesterday, an electrician that has a pretty notable lisp, who I think people have misjudged and as a result have left some pretty exceptional talent on the table. Assumed difficulty and cost is also very common. People feel that people with disabilities will be more costly or more challenging to manage. We find that that's not only not the case, but that accommodations, 59% of accommodations, according to a disability in study, cost $500 or less over the lifetime of the employee. So truly it's about productivity. And if accommodations can make someone more productive, not only is that cost so exceptionally minimal, but it pays for itself through their success in the workplace. And lastly, a very narrow view on diversity. Noel and I had the good fortune to review some diversity and inclusion reports from 2020 with some notable companies, and we were reviewing one that said they had partnered with 50 to 100 civil rights organizations, one of which was related to disability. So while there's been a lot of progress in the civil rights movement, there is still a lot to do, and we find that disability tends to still stay on the cusp of that. Part of our work is bringing that into the forefront. And we think that that this, not only is this webinar a part of it, but our partners in this movement are part of it as well. And what you see with each one of these is that really each is an artificial barrier that can be overcome through education, experience, and reasonable accommodation. Colleen, next slide. So what are the consequences of that, of this non-inclusive hiring, of these artificial barriers? So we have 9 people on this slide that have a few things in common. You can see here they graduate from some great universities, they have great GPAs. Those that are hourly have either specific good trade skill sets or have been honored by their employer for their reliability. I think there's really 3 things. 1, these represent some of the most economically valued individuals in the country. 2, I think they all have disabilities. And 3, Colleen, if you can click next, every single one of them is unemployed. So when you talk about the level of talent that's being left on the table, talent, revenue, productivity, innovation, et cetera, it really reiterates the substantial barrier that this is not only to our individual organizations, but really to the growth of the American economy. Colleen, can you switch to the next one? And so what is the business case for disability inclusion? First and foremost, I think it's a holistic talent pool. Right now, we have an inefficient labor market where the talents of everyone are not being capitalized on. When you create a talent pool that's more inclusive, it becomes more meritocratic. And so as an organization, you're making more optimal hiring decisions. We also see increased innovation. There's synergies between disability inclusion and accommodation with new ideas, new products. Easy to open packaging is one example. People don't know that texting was actually created as a disability accommodation that has now become ubiquitous. You also see synergies in your talent management. So we find employers that have hired people with disabilities have found that either the accommodations process or just the experience of working with someone that presents differently has made them better managers in their non-disabled workforce as well. Improved market share, disability index study, 78% of customers would be more willing to intentionally patronize an organization that supported people with disabilities. Talent shortage. I was reading a Korn Ferry article just yesterday that by 2030, there's going to be $8.5 trillion of uncapitalized revenue on the table just because they don't have either the talent or the labor to get it done. We work with a company in Arbor, just started working with a company in Ann Arbor that's 50 million in back order, and they just don't have the people to get the product out. Contrast that with an 80 to 90% unemployment rate for people with autism, and you see that there's a mismatch here that can be solved through more inclusive hiring. Improved productivity. Our program has a retention rate of 94%. Disability Inn has also done a study that's found that a good disability hiring program can reduce turnover by 30%. Of course, enhanced reputation for corporate citizenship. Ford Motor Company has been featured multiple times in the Detroit News, multiple times in the Free Press. They've been on NBC News, on 60 Minutes, because of their commitment to inclusive hiring. So there is a corporate citizenship component to this, as well as government incentives. The government recognizes that we have a huge segment of our workforce that's being untapped. And so there are various incentives like workforce opportunity tax credit, like the 7% requirement for government contractors, accommodation grants and tax credits and so on. So the case is there. I think it's a lot about education. It's a lot about us helping kind of walk with employers that want to make this happen. Colleen, can you go ahead, next slide? And then Noel, I think this is you.
Well, thanks, Mikhail. I think you've done a great job making sort of a business case for the work that we do. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about how we do what we do, in addition to the why. And I really appreciate being a part of this team. I just joined a couple of months ago to consult after an experience that I've had for quite some time. I won't mention the number of years in human resources with both industry. I worked for Chrysler for many years, but also healthcare, having worked for Henry Ford Health System. And the work that the Autism Alliance does, that Upbound at Work does, is something that honestly I think could be very effectively benchmarked by some organization, because what we're trying to do is provide support to candidates to help prepare them, including wherever they are, all the way up through support for employers in order to make the transition, the assimilation, and ultimately the success of the candidate as robust as possible. So I won't go through the detailed list of all of the things that you can see on the screen here, but what you'll recognize very quickly is that we do a lot of the work of the employment function that any organization, large or small, would do. But we do some additional things that, quite frankly, are the things that I think other organizations could learn from. And that is special guides, special helps, special navigation, if you will, that allows individuals that come into our family to be successful in what they're doing going forward. In addition to this, I will say we don't make it extraordinarily clear here, but we have started moving into some more consulting with some employers who in fact have asked us for advice on how they can better get into and capitalize upon some of this great talent that they haven't previously. So on the next slide, we do put process around what we do. This is just a high-level description, maybe a little bit difficult to see, of the process by which we become acquainted with a candidate, either because we outreach or they outreach to us, or they come to us through another opportunity. The way we screen and assess both where they are from an employability perspective, where they may be on the spectrum in terms of what sorts of jobs would be most appropriate. Our colleague Stuart is joining us on the panel to perhaps answer questions about how we do the assessing and make sure that we know exactly what the individual's capabilities might be, and in fact, whether it's the right time for us to immediately launch into the candidate preparation process, or if the individual might need some other services either internally or externally, at which case, once addressed, the individual would come back to us. We do employability skills training and updates, such as you saw on the prior slide, including things like making sure that a resume is appropriate, making sure that interview skills are appropriate, and then we put our best foot forward in helping the potential employee put his or her or their best foot forward as well. And then we sort of hold the hand of the individual and also provide support to the employer throughout the process as well, to make sure that both ends of the equation have all the support that they need. And on the subsequent slide, I'd like to discuss just a little bit what is the employer process, something that you might be interested in knowing in particular. First of all, we think it's really important that there be a generalized awareness of what we do and of what are the services that we can provide. And frankly, a lot of what we've already discussed so far this morning, which is around the business case and also the sort of some myth busting, if you will. And those are all things that start the process for us, and tremendous benefits that can be had by employing someone who's on the autism spectrum. We go through a modeling process where partners agree to the process model for a diversity hiring initiative to a fairly good level of detail. And then we develop the collaboration, put more sort of meat on the bones, if you will, of how we will actually work to develop the appropriate jobs to which candidates may be placed, and how we will develop the candidates for those jobs. And then there's training, and the training happens on both ends. Of course, as I've already mentioned, we spend a good deal of time working with candidates to make sure that they're well prepared for opportunities. On the other hand, we do a good deal to meet with the employer at the highest level and all the way down to the department level. I've been privileged to be involved in a couple of those experiences where we truly helped make sure that the environment was appropriate, that the colleagues who will be working with the individual candidate that we might provide or offer to the employer are prepared, well prepared for that to happen, and that we're ultimately setting the stage for success, after which there's a good deal of follow along. And that is something that is truly an assimilation process step that I think is critical, and it's led to some of the successes that the organization has had. And I think it's only through these kinds of processes on both the candidate and the employer side that we have had those. And on the next slide, in case we haven't
Noel,
done
can I
that.
just jump in real quick?
Of course.
It's just really to sort of emphasize a little more around this process. And our goal when we work with employer partners is it really is to streamline these and assimilate in a way that allows our candidates to come through your systems the way everybody else does. Now, we recognize that in some cases accommodations are needed, but we really believe that to grow scale, we don't want to create separate processes that are outside of what the company is already accustomed to. So some of that is that sort of unique work that we will do once that commitment is made. So I just wanted to jump in and sort of add to your earlier comment, Noel.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Colleen. So all of those comments, the ones Colleen made, the comments that Mikhail made, and the emphasis that I put on the employer and candidate process sort of illustrate why the Autism Alliance and why Upbound at Work really can be a very helpful special partner to you, to the extent, as Colleen emphasized, that we go through your normal hiring channels and very little support is necessary. That will happen. To the extent that more support would be valuable either to you, because perhaps it's the first time you've made this venture, or to a candidate, we're here to do that. I would say that it's a very individualized program, And that's part of the benefit of what we do. So we provide the ongoing support. We provide a pipeline of validated talent. And I can't emphasize enough, in addition to what Mikhail mentioned earlier, in these times when finding just the right talent for the right role at the right time can be so difficult, this is a really terrific opportunity, we think, for employers to find validated talent where we've already done a lot of the assessing. And of course, as you saw from the prior slide, the work that we do is multi-pillar. It's indeed a holistic program. And so on the next slide, we think that there's also another benefit to all of this. If you read through the bullets that you see on the slide, you can see that the prospect of bringing on folks with autism spectrum disorder, or indeed other disabilities, really can change the mindset about what accommodations are. And you can see that the other benefit that you could receive as an employer, quite frankly, is that there's something, and I've noticed this happening in my experiences so far, there's something that happens with sort of the engagement of the group. There's almost like an enhanced team spirit that happens. And you can see from some of the specific comments that we have here that that's very clear. The last comment, the experience of working with Austin has opened my eyes to how unique everyone is and made my life more meaningful. That is something that goes far beyond a normal employment experience to truly an engaging experience. And this is something that, among many other things, we hope you may discover.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Noel. So I'll take just a few minutes to talk a little bit about the Grand Traverse pilot and the work that we've done in the community thus far. So the pilot was initiated in late 2017, early 2018 as a partnership between GTI and Upbound AAOM. And the objective was to expand the labor pool to include individuals with autism and other disabilities in the county. So we had a 3-step pilot placement system. Upbound identified and developed the talented individuals. The employers would identify the roles, and then we would provide full cycle recruitment to retention support and consultation. And thus far, we've had some success. We've been able to develop relationships in one form or another with RJG, SMI, Tentcraft, and Bill Marsh. But I don't want you to take it just from me. I want you to hear from the panelists that are living and breathing this work every day. So with that, on the next slide, Colleen, I'll give our panelists just a minute or two to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their backgrounds, and we can get into some of the panel discussion. Maybe Mike, we can go ahead and start with you, and then Logan and Stuart.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Mike Grollo. I'm one of the principal owners of RJG Incorporated here in Traverse City. We are a technology business. We build sensors and software to help the companies who make plastic parts do so more effectively and cost effectively. I think that's about that's the quick summary.
Excellent. Logan, do you want to go ahead and introduce?
Sure. My name is Logan Hunter, and I'm an engineer at Seal Manufacturing, SMI, and I'm a design engineer, and I help design in our plant. SMI is an automotive assembly plant. We manufacture assembled components to ship out to customers like GM or Jeep or FCA. And I'm a design engineer, so I help design fixtures, maybe the occasional production component, and other things like that.
Excellent. Stuart?
And so my name is Stuart Siegel. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a board certified behavior analyst. I'm currently operating under Upbound as the training and assessment coordinator. So my role with the team is to provide an introductory interview to all candidates who come through our program and help guide them through our program, number one, but also help accessing accommodations on the workplace or resources outside of the Upbound system as needed by the individual candidates. I also do a few other things like on the job support as needed, or we've done some job retention stuff. So, you know, that's kind of my role, but I do fill other roles as needed.
Excellent. Appreciate it. So Mike, why don't we go ahead and kick it off with you? What is your experience been of leading and managing someone with a disability? You know, how has it been the same, different? What benefits have you seen?
Sure. So I should start by just giving a little bit of background to how we got involved with Autism Alliance. So we kind of did this inadvertently. We had an NM student from NMC, our local community college, who was in the computer software program, that did an internship with us for a period, and was looking for longer term employment, and so it didn't go through the typical interviewing process that if we had hired him directly as a software developer. But he was, you know, sharp, very sharp kid. Did a really great job. And like a number of our other software developers, it was just a little bit quirky, you know. So it just kind of comes with the territory. I can say that as an engineer. So I'll refer to him by his first name. So Evan had early on let us know that he was on the autism spectrum, and had let us know that, hey, this is something this is who I am, and I recognize that sometimes I'm a little bit socially awkward, and I'm open to feedback, and you know, if I'm doing something that is inappropriate, please let me know. And that ended up being like the key ingredient to success. Because Evan had let us know that this was a disability that he had, and it created awareness of that. Oh, well, this is why Evan behaves this way, and he's open to feedback to improve. And so as an intern, he had a mentor internally who worked with him and was able to occasionally say, hey Evan, whoa, let's go back. What you did there, don't do that. and Evan was good enough to realize that, yeah, okay, thank you for the feedback. Okay, yep. And so the process of adding that component to an understanding that you've got an employee with a disability, and how the team can best work with that individual. It's really no different than we do with other employees in identifying strengths and weaknesses, and work on development opportunities. But knowing that there's a specific issue that needs to be addressed. I'll give you a counter example to this. It's an employee we have that now that I've learned more about autism and some of the challenges, that communication challenges that autistic employees have, I suspect he's on the spectrum. I don't even know whether, if he is. It's likely that he doesn't realize it, and it creates those communication barriers, create tremendous obstacles. And when both the employee and the employer are aware of those challenges and those obstacles, and can work to develop around those, then the true potential of that individual can be brought out. And that was certainly the case with Evan. And today he's been with us for, geez, it's 4 or 5 years now. And he's liked, he's respected, he's a great fit with our culture, and he's a real sharp guy, and we're so lucky to have him with us.
And you know, Mike, something you're bringing up there, this feeling of being able to be your full self at work is so critical, and it's very much something that a lot of the individuals we work with will identify as well. They don't feel they have to hide anything. They feel being able to have that conversation and be appreciated for having that conversation is just great for their, you know, their own self-confidence, their own mental health, et cetera. So thank you. Great experience, great story. Logan, maybe we can move to you. Can you tell us one thing your leadership team or coworkers did to make you maybe feel most welcome in your role?
Yes, and I guess I should come up with a little bit of a background. Being autistic, we have and it's different for everybody. Everybody has their slight little quirks, and everybody's just slightly a little bit different. So it takes a while to get to know somebody who has autism to start understanding the full range of their quirks. And one of them that seems to be kind of universal is not really being open to new relationships. So say you're put into an unfamiliar environment. A normal person would go around and start asking questions. Hey, what's your name? My name is so-and-so. I'm in this position now. How can I help? Normal people would do that. Autistic people or autistic people with disabilities have a tendency to kind of hide. They'll find a nice corner that's nice and safe, that they feel relatively protected, and they will just remain there, and they don't really want to budge anywhere. That's at least in my case. And the one thing my coworkers did is they were willing to have the conversation with me. They were forcing me to come out of that tiny little corner that I was hiding in, and asking me questions and asking my opinions, and just really being open to changing their habits that they may have established with their previous employee in my position, and open to changing it to suit my needs, which actually helped me come out of the woodwork a little bit to become a better employee.
Excellent. Great story. Thank you, Logan. Stuart, I want to ask you a quick question, then we'll get into some of the audience Q&A. Stuart, you've had an opportunity to see a variety of job seekers with disabilities in your role. In general, how would you summarize the knowledge, skill, character of the people you're evaluating and supporting?
I think what's important to recognize is people who are coming through the Upbound system are doing it of their own free will. These are active job seekers. So when you ask a question like that, what you're talking about is people who really want to find work and want to find work in the field that either they've studied or of a particular interest to them. So when you ask about the character, I would defer to professionalism, right? These are individuals who are looking to be active members of an employment community, and not only that, be contributing members of an employment community. So I look at that more as like, character is one thing, but what we're looking for on the job site is professionalism and dedication to the job, right? Individuals with autism, as Logan just noted, are just as different as everyone else, right? So each individual is going to have their strengths and their areas for improvement. But the people who come through Upbound and some of the other agencies who may be doing this type of work, these people are here because they want to be here. And I think that's a really important component of hiring anyone, is the dedication to their work and to their community. So I think that's a really important factor to be addressed. And something I want to say that Mike brought up was the uniqueness of each individual. And once given an opportunity to show what they can do, you take someone who would otherwise be seen as, well, to use Logan's language, quirky, to sort of blossom and become an individual and a major contributor to an employment team.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart. We do have a question from the audience for the entire panel. Is it true that those on the spectrum can often be incredibly effective in their jobs and even more committed to their employers?
I would say in some cases, yes, with certain people. We can also be very hyper focused to particular tasks if it attracts our interest. Let's say in my current position, I'm a design engineer and I'm on the job with an assignment where I need to design some kind of a component for a customer. A customer needs help, want me to help them design this part. I've had to stop myself more than a few times to look at the time. Okay, it's 6 o'clock. It's time to go home. I need to go home, just relax and come back. So in cases, yes, we can be hyper-focused and be effective. In other cases, it just depends on what kind of disabilities the individual may have on the side. Sometimes they don't just have autism. Sometimes they have other disabilities to go along with it.
Yeah, if I could build on that hyper focus in our experience. So Evan is in the same way in software development. That's a tremendous skill, and so that what is a symptom of a disability ends up being a great strength. And so Evan's great at what he does, in part because of who he is. And as far as I can't remember the way the question was asked, but as a result, so you're dealing with people who have tremendous potential, but they realize the obstacles that they're up against in the job market, have experienced the challenges of finding a job, and when they do find a job that's satisfying with a group that they can work productively with, and they can flourish. If you want to talk about a loyal employee who's committed and passionate, that's Evan, and so yeah, these I would call these diamonds in the rough. That if you can find these folks and give them the opportunity, and provided the coaching the Autism Alliance and Upbound provides, it creates a great opportunity for both the employer and the employee.
And I'll just, Mikhail, if I just jump in to Mike's point and the question around productivity, what we typically hear from employers in working with employees with autism or other disabilities in some cases is that the biggest concern actually ends up being boredom, because of that level of productivity, that hyper focus, that in many cases the same amount of work that it would take for a non-disabled or non-autistic employee to complete is done in half the time, and then that person needs something. So that piece around the education and the preparing the employer for some of those contingencies is really critical. And we always say a little bit of knowledge goes a long way, because with boredom, that's where, you know, you open up the possibility that there could be some challenges or problems on the work site. And we want to get ahead of that. So as an employer, knowing that before that individual even steps in the door is how you create the success and the retention long term.
Excellent. Thank you, Colleen. So we have some more questions from the audience. The first one, thank you today. Will we get copies of the slides and recordings? We will be sending some additional information, including some of the slides after the presentation. Can you say more about disincentives? Part of the same question. Can you say more about disincentives for people with disabilities and what employers can do about this? And then second question to that, also the good COVID has taught us about disability and employment. So I guess maybe we'll start with just revisiting the disincentives component of what you discussed. I'll answer it. I have some of my thoughts, and I'll open it up to the panel as well as our staff as well. So a lot of it ends up being related to education. So assumptions about cost, assumptions about ability. A lot of that is education that can be traditional. It can be things like webinars like this, but it can also be exposure therapy. So we often find that people find new understanding and appreciation for disability inclusion and become supporters of disability inclusive employment through having kind of taken that leap of faith with our program, with similar programs, and experiencing what that process looks like with a pilot program, which we've done with several employers in the past. Volunteerism is another way to get involved with that. I believe Noel will be talking a little bit more about that later in the presentation and some of the benefits of kind of how you can overcome those, you know, perceptions, biases, challenges. I think partnership, as I kind of mentioned with us, alleviates some of that as well, because we're walking with you. We can be that kind of educational resource. You know, you can kind of get a step into or a foot into the world in a very supported environment. But I would say from the kind of the interview side, it often ends up being a perfection of HR is the way I would describe it. And so when you talk about, for example, the norms of interviewing, my recommendation, I think, to almost any HR professional is to revisit your interview systems and say, is this, you know, the stated and unstated, you know, norms and rules, is this helping me determine who is the best, the most talented person for this given position? Or is this telling me who's the best at interviewing? And I think Noel, as a, you know, a strong, experienced HR professional, may have some points to add on that as well.
I would absolutely. And quite frankly, through my affiliation with this great organization, I've learned even more about that. I've interviewed thousands of people over, as I said, more years than I'd care to admit. And we do tend frequently as employers, especially if we don't have really strong screening processes for what may be a large number of resumes or a large number of candidates that come our way, go to the old tried and true methods of sort of skinnying down the list. Some of those may in fact prevent the opportunity to even consider or much less hire folks like Logan or the colleague that Mike was talking about, Evan, I think you said. And as a result of that, employers who are more educated, who are careful not to look at things that really don't have any meaning, such as how well does the candidate make eye contact, or how eloquent is the candidate in answering certain questions, you know, how much energy or excitement or enthusiasm does the candidate place into it. Being able to move beyond those things, I think, can be very helpful to the employer, actually not eliminating a very, very strong and, as we've discussed, dedicated talent pool.
What we've seen in the past too is pretty unique partnerships that'll look to overcome some of those traditional biases, particularly in talent acquisition. So we've partnered with companies that have completely done away with interviews, and they said, we're just going to bring people on as, you know, contractors and give them a chance to showcase their ability. Or particularly if they're technically skilled, we're going to start with a technical interview, you know, let them showcase what they're best at, what we're going to ask them to do, and then go from there. So I really think that often partnering with a specialized organization like Upbound, like GTI, like others, will help not only overcome some of those educational barriers, but really facilitate some of the problem solving, to identify, as Nola talked about with our consulting relationships, what historically have been the barriers to hiring people with disabilities, and what are some of the solutions that we've seen or other organizations have seen as a repeat player in this field. So,
Kyle, I'm just going to quickly, I don't mean to cut you off, but I know we don't have a lot of time, but we can follow up with another document that I think really dispels some of those myths and the disincentive component to doing this, which is, there's a perception that, we'll have to increase our workers' comp and liability coverage. That because of the disability, there will be higher absenteeism, that people with disabilities cannot meet performance standards, expensive accommodations, there's ADA regulations and compliancy standards. And, we've got some good data that sort of systematically encourages you to go through with hiring and consider hiring people with disabilities and not let myths or what are perceived disincentives to get in the way of doing that. So I just wanted to highlight that these are some of those others, and we have data that suggests that they really are not substantial enough to deter interested employers from hiring from the population.
Excellent. Thanks, Colleen.
Yep.
We'll share that information as well. One of the additional questions, Stuart, I would like to touch base with you on is asking about our experience of successes and challenges in the retail setting. And I know you've had some experience doing some on-the-job support there. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a kind of update on your experience on that.
Yeah, and this actually kind of piggybacks a little bit off of what you guys were just discussing with interviewing. One of the key components of autism spectrum disorder is communication challenges. Now, how that plays out is going to be different from individual to individual, but this is number one, a problem in the interview process. But getting to that question directly, can be a problem in retail settings. Now, with training, and with a supportive environment, this can be mitigated. Getting to some of the other things that I've seen as far as challenges in a retail setting is when a customer approaches a person with ASD, how does that person react, right? Now, one of the things that I've found that has been very helpful for the people that I work with are things like task lists or bullet pointed things to if this, then this sort of thing. So with that sort of practice and those sorts of task lists, some of those challenges, those communication challenges can be overcome. Now, this strategy can also be used for teaching stocking shelves in a retail environment or cleaning customer areas. And these are all things that are, when we talk about accommodations, are relatively inexpensive. It's really just writing down a task and bullet pointing it, right? And this can be an accommodation for a person that can be valuable, right? And can help them overcome some of these challenges. Kind of getting towards Colleen's point from the last slide, where accommodations don't need to be incredibly expensive to be effective for a person. Some additional training and some just additional job aids can really make the difference. And so in a retail setting, we have a major partner here in the Metro Detroit area. And can I say the name, Mikhail? Our furniture store? Okay, Gardner White. We have a very good relationship with Gardner White, and they've taken on some of their housekeeping staff from our candidates. These candidates have been, in large part, very successful at their jobs. And this is due to the job aids that we provided and the training that we provided at the outset of their employment. So we spent maybe 1 or 2 weeks with each candidate, sort of touching base in learning their new job and learning these new job aids. And once that period was over, now they're successful in their work and we're getting good feedback about how they're doing. So these sorts of accommodations are inexpensive. take a little bit of time, but aren't overly time consuming and can really make the difference for a person. So when you talk about stuff in a retail setting or job tasks or customer service in a retail setting, a little bit of extra training in a job aid can make all the difference for this person. And then you're left with the dedication and loyalty of a person who's just happy to be there.
Thank you, Stuart. We do have a little bit of few remaining slides we want to discuss as well. So I just want to open up one last question to the panelists. And of course, if the audience has any additional questions they'd like, please send them to us and we'll follow up with you after the presentation. But is there anything that hasn't been discussed yet that you would like to share with the audience? Maybe we can go to Mike, Logan, Stuart.
Sure. So we've been, through our experience, we've really had the pleasure of working closely with the Autism Alliance to help promote awareness of autism and the opportunities for employment of autistic employees to others in our community. And through that involvement, I've had, I can't tell you how many people that I've known that I had no idea that they had a connection to somebody with autism. And I can't tell you how many of those people have reached out and just said, thank you for what you're doing. You know, I have a son, I have a grandchild, I have a friend who is on the spectrum, and what struck me is how hidden this is and how pervasive this is, and Colleen put up some of the statistics, but when you hear the personal stories and you hear the impact that their experience, that one, just knowing that there's hope for those who are still in school, and for those who are involved in the program, just hearing the impact it's had on their lives, it's truly impactful.
Mike, I just want to make a comment following that, which is, you know, what we have found in sort of secondary reward in all this work is that it really is how you create the culture, right? The culture of inclusion, and the number of people who come forward to disclose and share, whether it's a personal connection or it's they themselves that now feel comfortable because the environment, the work environment, is one where it is okay. And we've all learned, you know, how to interact with and communicate with those, you know, quirky employees, if you will. So thank you for saying that, but it's certainly, you know, the beginnings of how you do that.
And that culture spreads, that concept spreads to the rest of the workforce, leads to broader engagement. And if we put this in strictly business terms, we know that a more engaged organization means a more productive organization with less turnover. So the benefits just go far beyond almost anything we did discuss today.
Excellent. Okay. Without any final remarks, Colleen, do you want to kick us back over to the PowerPoint just to finish up?
Given the amount of time that we actually don't have left, and of course we would never want to cut off that great discussion. Thanks so much to everybody. Some of the detail here in the slides that we would share at the end talk about things such as you see here, you know, how to in fact get involved in the disability rights movement, you know, through volunteering, through donations, and through spreading the word. And then beyond that, we're really interested in knowing on the subsequent slide how we can be of support to you. So please recognize, as I mentioned earlier, our employment work is critically important. We do have consultation capability to help you understand better and make yourself and individuals who might work with you more successful. And then training, developing competencies for leadership and for staff. We've done a lot of this work. We're happy to consult with you on doing that and make your job as an employer easier, broader, and get some of the benefits that we discussed earlier. So in terms of where you can learn more about this, and these of course are documents that we will send out, including some hyperlinks here, you can see that there's a fairly broad list of places that would offer additional information to you that you can do on your own, or certainly consult with us on that. And then in addition, we'd love to have you just reach out to us directly. And so we'll also provide information. I think it's contained in the next slide as well, that tells you how best to get out, to get in touch with us and to get more information, or certainly to reach out about how we can partner in this very, very important work.
Thank you, Noel. So that is the time that we have available. I wanted to thank everyone, both our audience members for joining us, as well as our presenters and panelists for sharing their knowledge and insight. If you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with us by email. If you feel that you would benefit from our navigator services, Kara, one of our training specialists, has shared the information for our navigator team in the chat as well. You will be receiving a SurveyMonkey after this event. We just encourage you to please give us your feedback. We're looking to take your insights and experiences to help us not only better share the information, but really improve the engagement in this movement, in the disability rights movement.
Kyle, I just have one more thank you.
Sure.
You know, a good deal of our work isn't possible without the local support, and we've really had that, and we are grateful for what we were able to do with Swing Shift. We were invited to that event last year, which was great fun, on top of being a fundraiser for us. But the Rotary was also quite generous and in a grant that we were able to secure last year. So the charitable component to this work is we just need to recognize that and to thank the community overall.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, if there's no final thoughts, then again, thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any follow-up, please reach out to us, and we look forward to making Traverse an economy that is inclusive for all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.